everybody. Um, as I mentioned earlier, I will again be filling in for the good people at Bonvenue Bank. Unfortunately, there was an emergency, and that's still ongoing for the person who was going to facilitate. So I will be teaching today's session on identity theft and protecting your identity and other assets. It is the first time I've ever taught this, so please bear that in mind. This is not a topic that I consider myself an expert in, although I have found some very, very useful information on it. Housekeeping stuff. Tomorrow's marketing clinic has been moved to next Wednesday. I'm going to send an update about that today, just for various scheduling reasons. So we're going to have two in a row as opposed to bi-weekly, next week and the week after. I'm still working with Orhan on the topics for those, so please bear that in mind. For tomorrow, there is no session. And then on Thursday, we'll be looking at credit scores. I think Bonvenue Bank will be facilitating those because they have someone else who can jump in. So, and then on the 26th, it's our mixer. If you haven't got the calendar invite for that, let me know. That's from 5 to 7, and it is on the West Bank, being hosted by Kasha Age at the Mind Body Collective. 5 to 7. It's a social media boot camp. Please, if you can attend, it'd be great to see you. I will be there. We will not be doing a mixer and in-person mixer in September. Just a heads up, this is the last one until October. All right, I'm gonna share my screen. Hopefully you can see the presentation. Uh, all right, can everybody see the presentation?
Yes, we can see it.
Okay, great. All right. So I'll jump straight into it. So today we're looking at identity and fraud. This is maybe one of the topics that doesn't seem to quite naturally fit into personal finance, but it is, as they all are, extremely important. I want to quickly turn it over to people on this session. Has anyone here been the victim of a fraud for their business or themselves? Feel free to unmute or put in the chat box. You can just put yes. But I just want to quickly turn it back over and to see, has anyone here been the victim of any kind of fraud? Thankfully, no. Good. Glad to hear. Tadase? Oh dear. We can maybe further down in the workshop we can go into, you can, if you feel like talking about it, you can share that. A debit card. I can definitely get on to how we can protect you against something like that in the future. Um, so so basically the whole point of this session, I'm going to make you aware of the different risks and then also look at the different steps you can take to protect yourself against those risks. As small business owners, we are, I think, one of the most vulnerable populations for fraud. Scammers are attacking small business owners the whole time for various reasons. We don't have the protections that larger businesses have. Typically, there's better infrastructure in medium and large businesses to protect against this thing. We usually just owner operators. We typically have more cash in the bank than individuals, so there's more assets to steal. And yeah, it's easy prey for scammers. I'm constantly being barraged with attempts to defraud Flyte almost daily. A lot of them they're mostly extremely obvious, but some of them are a bit more sophisticated. So let's get on to that. And we're talking, both about individuals and the business here because they're both are attempted, or both have fraud attempted on them all the time. But as business owners, it's probably more so than just the average person. So Asset, what is an asset? Something you own that has value. A risk, the potential for harm. Um, you know, the whole point of this session is kind of learning how to protect your assets. Your business is one of the most important things in your life. It's for most of us a livelihood. The risk of it, having all that money taken away and not being protected, it would be catastrophic for all of us. So, um, the downsides to not protecting yourself are enormous, which is why this is such a hugely important topic, because um, there's often very little recourse to getting that money back if someone gains access to your accounts. And I will talk about those protections later on, but it's really it can be devastating. It could be the end of the business. And so let's talk about reducing the risk. Um, you can't eliminate all risks, but you can definitely reduce some of them. So it's really about doing as much as possible now to anticipate risk, protect yourself against those dangers. So these are the topics we're going to be looking at. So how to manage personal data, what your rights and responsibilities are, and insurance. So just reiterating, let's look at the risks and take steps to prepare for them. So there are ways to reduce risk, and there is help that's available. So as it was said earlier, your identity is an asset. Um, and it's a crime that happens when someone uses a person's identifying information without authority. So can anyone just kind of put in the chat box or unmute? What are the kinds of documents that you think have the information that people can hack in, or can use to steal your identity? What are things that we receive every day that could potentially lead to that? Any thoughts? Yeah,
Yeah, I was gonna
credit
say
card
credit
offers.
cards. Yep.
Credit card offers, definitely.
I would say
Um,
this is Melanie, bank statements. They come
yes,
in the
bank
mail.
statement, which is why I strongly encourage you go paperless. You can always opt. Any bank should offer you paperless statements
Yeah.
if you can. One quick, easy step you can do today: go as paperless as you can, because the more paper you have going around with your name, address, potentially account numbers, the more risks you have to your business and yourself. So try and avoid, and with credit card offers, things like that, those are unsolicited. They come to you. So you've got to basically, if you get those things like that, try and dispose of them as safely as possible, somewhere where tear them up. Make sure that your name, your address, especially any numbers associated with your bank, your credit card number, bank details, none of that is anywhere that someone can rifle through trash cans and take that information and then start using it to build up an identity theft strategy against you, because it does happen a surprising amount. People also actually go through landfills and try and find information like that. So tear it up, make sure it's not visible. There's all
This is
kinds
Melanie
of
again. Oh,
yes.
I
Go
was
ahead,
gonna also
Melanie.
say, I was gonna also say, I know it was a big issue for me back when I was applying to like a lot of apartments when I was, because back when it was like all paper applications and then you're putting that information. So I remember having like LifeLock or one of those systems because my social was out in the world a lot.
Yeah, absolutely. And the same
Lately
online.
lately too, I've been noticing, I've been getting a lot of communication about data breaches. And
Mhm.
but sometimes I think the data breach is a scam also, because I mean, I don't know if it's legit or not. Almost every account, be it a medical account, I'm always getting these data breach notifications, and you're almost afraid to even respond to that, because what if that's a breach in itself?
Yeah, I know. I get those all the time too. And the way to protect against that is every account you have, you should have a different and complex password for. I use Chrome, and I'm sure and most browsers do this. They suggest strong passwords. and then they store it in a secure location where only you can access it. And I really recommend this. Every email you have, every website you're on, use a different password for each of those, because if you have one password that they get hold of, and that's immediately, then someone has access to all of your information, especially once someone's in your email. It's then things can go really south, because often emails are used to verify with those 6-digit numbers that you always get, and you have to type it in. Often that's all they need to get into your bank and bank, online bank portal, and start transferring money out. So one just big tip I can give that's not necessarily mentioned in this presentation, which is surprising, is use different passwords for everything, as much as you can, and use if there is an option on your browser, the suggested ones are incredibly long and use multiple characters, uppercase, lowercase. So the reason why is because there's no software on earth that can crack those passwords. They're just unbreakable passwords. So a lot of people typically, when they're using their own password, will use something that is a combination of hopefully uppercase, lowercase letters and a special character. But you'd be amazed how quickly the technology is that can break those passwords now. So first things first, don't when you see those data breaches, sometimes you can find out which if it shows you the organization, go to that. If you have an account with them, immediately change the password. That's the best way to protect yourself. If somebody has a hold of your social, yep, that's fine, but there's a limited number of things they can do if you keep your account secure. So that's just a really important note on that. So what are the different types of scam? So I don't want to go into tons of details, but this is what we tend to see on a day-to-day basis. So phishings, which is by them somebody calling you, which is vishing. Smishing is via text. I get these all the time. Especially the ones from supposedly the US Postal Service asking me. They're saying that they're holding a package and they need me to pay a small amount to verify my address. And then you look at the link and the website looks okay, but the link is 100% not the USPS's website. That one nearly got me. I'll tell you, I was close. I was already sort of typing in. I was like, wait, I was like, why would they even be asking for this? So that's a really common one that people fall for. A lot of ones with Amazon refunds, people calling because there's some kind of issue with an Amazon refund. It's not Amazon. They're trying to get your details so that they can take money out of your account. Farming, fake websites. When you have a browser, there's usually a little like block symbol on the the browser bar that shows you that the website is secure. If you don't see that, it is an unsecure website, and there is a risk that it could be a fake website. So always look for that. Skimming, this happens all over the place, and is relatively hard to avoid, except just maybe try avoid using your card in any machine that you don't feel 100% safe in. Tadase mentioned debit card. Tadase, are you able to just quickly talk about what happened with your debit card? If not, don't worry. Okay. Well, I'll quickly.
Yeah,
Oh,
I can
Tadase.
talk about it. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Sorry, my internet is going in and out. My debit card, so I had it on me physically, but what happened was that I was getting charged in Florida at a gas station.
And do you know how it happened? That they got the details?
Still don't know how they got the details, but they were basically typing it in manually at a gas
Mm.
station in Florida. And it was like where you hand someone cash,
Oh, I see.
you
So
know,
they were
who's
getting
standing
cash
outside by
back.
the pump. and they were using my card inside.
Huh.
Wow.
And had you been in Florida or had anything taken from you?
No, had not been in Florida. My card was on me. I went to the bank with my physical card, and we watched
Oh,
them charge it while I was standing in front of. But they had to let it go for, I think, 10 days while they tried to track it. And it just depleted all the money out of my account. But because they did determine it fraud, they wind up reversing the charges. But I had no access to my money for about 3 weeks, which is why I
geez.
don't. So I have a separate account now that that my debit card is linked to that only has money that I put on it. I don't have it linked to like my checking account anymore, just to limit
Mm.
any chances of fraud.
Yeah, that's definitely one important thing. I would say that ideally if you have a credit card, use your credit card as much as possible, except for getting cash out, because obviously they charge for that. Credit cards are typically a lot more secure and it's easier to get your money back because there's a 3-day wait period between the purchase and it being taken out of your, being added to your credit card. It's really easy to flag stuff. Also, credit cards have a lot more usually a lot of them have insurance built into the card. So if somebody uses your card for something fraudulent, it's typically you're insured against it. Also, just for purchases, a lot of purchases you make legitimately are insured. Um, Debit cards are, once they have that, it's really easy for someone to take money out of an account with a debit card. And also debit cards just have they have direct access to the cash in your account. Credit
Hmm.
cards, they're not taking cash out of your account. They're adding to the balance, but the money hasn't left your account yet. So there's an extra layer of protection by using your personal credit cards. I never use my debit card. I don't really bring it anywhere unless I know I need to get out cash, which is very rarely these days. Um, I would just highly recommend uh, if you have a credit card, use that instead for payments versus a debit card because that adds a huge layer of protection. And yeah, it could have been a scanner. Yeah, and you can have a blocking wallet is a smart thing to do because that can prevent people from reading the card remotely, which happens. So yeah, there are scanners that can do that. So my best advice is put your cards on your phone as well. But again, be careful with having the NFC turned on so that people can scan it. Um, just try and avoid taking cards out with you that you don't need. I have a tiny little wallet that has my ID and one card in it when I go out because there's just there's no need for anything else. So try and minimize the opportunities for your card and numbers to be out in the open. So that is just a little bit about that. Any questions or something that somebody wanted to share about that?
It's
All right.
interesting.
Yeah. It is a very interesting topic and it changes all the time. And it's very important. So warning signs. So this is where we tie into budgeting because they're all connected, these topics, and this is one that is really important. So um, being good at budgeting helps prevent fraud. I say that because if you're looking at your statements monthly or more regularly than that, you can pick up fraudulent transactions much more easily than if you're ignoring your personal and business bank statements and not checking them regularly. It's just best practice at the end of every month. Go through all of your purchases, both personal, family, and business, and make sure you recognize everything. Because sometimes they'll start with a small, the fraud can be a small transaction that starts increasing, or even just a subscription service that you've been put on that you have no idea about. I've had that a couple of times where I've looked and I've gone, I'm not, what the hell am I paying for? And then, I look into it and it's I'd signed up for a website that I thought was free, and it was some sort of software subscription, and I'm suddenly being charged for it. So it's just good practice. Check your statements every month. Check, credit card, bank statements, everything. Doesn't take that long, especially if you're doing it every month, because you don't have a ton of expenses to go through. Um, it's good for budgeting, obviously, but it's really good for fraud too. So keep an eye out. And obviously, if someone's refusing your checks, that's a big problem. Then there's a more serious issue. If transactions are not going through, then again, pretty obvious that there is something going on there. It's always worth calling your bank immediately, and there's a number on the back of those cards that will tell you. So just some warning signs there, but try and get as far ahead of things as possible. One of the other things you can do that I recommend is some credit cards and debit cards. The app will actually send you a notification every time there's a transaction that goes through. I highly recommend that. It may be a bit annoying because you're getting notifications, but um, it's a really good way to kind of keep an eye on what you're spending on the go. And I've definitely flagged some fraud on my card where I've just seen like a push notification for something I did not recognize. I looked into it, and then before it could even clear on my balance on my credit card, I was able to call and have it stopped, and block that payment from ever going through again. So, um, staying on top of everything really helps. It's just the main way of if you already have been defrauded, the best way of preventing further fraud is just keeping an eye on your statements for your personal and business. Other signs, so letters about accounts you didn't open, that's a pretty obvious sign. Emails about purchases, statements. So this is all stuff I've mentioned. Debt collectors calling about debts that aren't yours, that's very serious, and that's when things have probably gotten on much further than they should have. Passwords, the username's not working. Again, please make sure to change your passwords and make them all different. You do not want, your bank password being your email password. It's the same as some subscription service you have for for Netflix. Because if there's a breach in one, then it's a breach in all, because they have your email and they have your password for whatever else is using that same password. So, um, if that is the case for you, the one thing you can do right now to protect yourself is go through all the passwords you have for everything and make sure they are all different and sophisticated, and that your browser stores them and it's secure. Usually, again, Chrome, I'm sure Safari does this. They have their own encrypted, built-in technology that secures all your passwords. You don't need to pay for the subscription service for us, some kind of like password storer. You can do it inside of your browsers now. Highly recommend doing that. Okay, so more warning signs. Unfamiliar accounts in your credit report. Again, we're talking about credit on Thursday. Again, Tadasi, you're right. You can change it so if it's over a certain dollar amount, you're not getting every tiny payment coming through, so you can change that. We're looking at credit on Thursday, but this is why you should be checking your credit report very regularly, once a month, if not more, just because then you'll immediately see a new account and you'll be able to pick it up and stop it. Medical bills, obviously, multiple tax returns, huge red flags if any of these are coming through. And here is notification about a data breach. Notification about a data breach is not a sign that you have been compromised. It just means that a service that you are a member of, or an organization you are tied to, like your bank, has had a breach. Just make sure you find out where the breach is, change the password, and make sure that that is not the same as another password. That is probably my number one top tip from this entire session, is make sure all the passwords are different and make sure they are complicated. They're complex passwords, because that's number one way someone's going to steal your identity, is actually just by logging into your accounts. So here we go. Here's some other steps. So guard the personal information. We talked about that. Don't throw away mail with your information on it without tearing it up a little bit and making sure it's not really visible. Or you can buy a shredder if you really want. That's probably overkill in my view, but just stop that stuff from going into the wild. Sign up for direct deposit as well. Try and reduce the amount of checks and things out there that are paper. Clean up financial trash. We talked about that. And here we go. This is the other one we talked about. Review your financial accounts regularly and carefully. That is the other area that if anyone's not doing this, it's just best practice as a business owner to do this anyway. But it has all sorts of ancillary benefits because it'll help you budget, it'll protect you against fraud, and just give you visibility on what you're spending in the business and also personally. So, try and block out time every month to go through all of your accounts and just check through every payment, make sure that they make sense, and take a note of it. There are more steps. Protect your devices. It just means make sure you have a password or a facial recognition or whatever is the safest, as opposed to like a 4-digit code that anyone can guess, especially not your birthday. We've all done it. We've all put our birthdays as the 4-digit code. That is very easy for someone to guess. So try and avoid doing that. But think of a 4 or 6-digit code that somebody would not be able to guess. Because they will. They can get hold of your birthday really easily. So, you can review a credit report, annual credit report. We'll talk about this on Thursday. But this is the annual credit report you get once a year free, and it's the full breakdown of your credit report, all everything. So it's way more detailed than what you would get through looking through like your credit card provider or something like that. We'll talk about that Thursday then. Keep documents secure, be aware of scams. I'm sure, especially around hurricane time, there's all kinds of scams that can come through. Read scam alerts, that kind of thing. There is a website you can also do if you have been defrauded and you need to report it. There is identitytheft.gov, and you can create a report that starts a paper trail that your bank may well need. So there is something you can do immediately if you're pretty sure you've been defrauded. Go to identitytheft.gov. So yeah, the other thing you can do, place a fraud alert on your credit reports. So there's the 3 bureaus. Make sure you contact all of them. Experian, TransUnion, and Equifax. All of them need to be told immediately because it will, unfortunately, I think there are ways to do it for all 3 at the same time, but I'm not sure. Dispute, place and a credit freeze is another thing you can do now. It's easy to do. It's a bit tedious if you're like going through some processes like getting a new credit card or a line of credit. Because the freeze, you have to unfreeze it every time and refreeze it. Even like filing taxes, you have to unfreeze it temporarily. But the credit freeze is actually the strongest way of preventing someone from accessing or putting things on your credit that shouldn't be there. So, communicate with your creditors and debt collectors. Just following on from this. So yeah, this is pretty self-explanatory. Alert people about fraudulent accounts, get copies of documents related to the theft so you can prove that there's a fraud, and then get written information, just as much information as you can gather to prove the fraud. So there are other federal rights. There is you do have some limited liability for fraudulent debts. So you have some protection, but not a ton. Have a look in detail about what those are. Unfortunately, there's not a great deal of protection for money being stolen for a small business, unfortunately. So there is some, but not enough. So the key takeaway: you can reduce your risk, and there is help available if you need it. And we've already talked about all of the different ways that we can do that today. One thing we haven't talked about yet is insurance. We have talked about record keeping, but we'll talk a little bit about insurance. So who here has, business liability insurance?
I do.
You do? Good. So, did I say you do? Excellent. I do. Very important, Kristen. Excellent. Good. So, that's one thing you can do to protect yourself, although you need to check and make sure that because not all policies have provisions for fraud. So another thing you can do is just check through your policy and see what it details about loss from fraud, because not every policy will have you covered for fraud, and if they do, there's often a lot of get out clauses um, to avoid paying out. So yeah, at Kristen, I told the vendors I work with, I should also have insurance, but that's usually difficult. So I mean, general liability. You were told by vendors you work with should also have insurance. Oh, the vendors you work with. Yes, but frankly, if you have insurance, that's the most important thing, because if everybody gets sued, which happens an alarmingly large amount of time in Louisiana, you're still protected. The other organizations that you work with may not be protected. That's on them to have the insurance that they need. You're not. The risk to you is severely diminished if you carry insurance. So don't worry too much about that. You want to make sure. I mean, it's not your job to police if they have the insurance. Um, some organizations require you to have certain insurance, depending on what work you do. For example, pop-ups, if you're in the food and beverage, there's often like liability insurance requirements and things like that. We have a bunch of insurance requirements through our funders. Some of it we need, some of it we don't need, but we still have to get it anyway, which is tedious. Just, I would say, and we have a broker we work with at Flyte who is awesome. If anyone has any insurance questions or is like thinking about getting liability insurance, I can connect you directly with Sophia. She's really good. She does all of our insurance. She will find you the right quote. What I will say is that liability insurance is actually quite cheap. It's a lot cheaper than you think it is. So definitely if you're going to carry any kind of business insurance, definitely look at getting some liability. It's really cheap, despite the fact that everyone sues each other here. It's actually quite cheap for what it is, and you do not want to get stuck in a lawsuit without liability insurance. Here's some other kinds of insurance. This is not relevant to fraud so much. I'm not really going to dwell on these. There is specific identity theft insurance. I'm not an expert on it, but you can get it. I'm sure it's relatively cheap. If you really think you're extremely vulnerable to it, have a look at that. But also just check because liability insurance often covers fraud as well. It just depends on your policy. But I would definitely, yeah, it's if you have no insurance right now as a business owner, the one I would look into is liability insurance. As I said, we have a great broker who will find affordable insurance for whatever level you're looking for. I would just have that in your back pocket because you never know what's going to happen here, and people love a lawsuit that names just about if one person you work with gets sued, they will often name businesses that organization is affiliated with. So even if you're not being sued, you could get named in a lawsuit, and that could gum up all kinds of stuff for your business because you suddenly have to declare to your bank and your investors if you have investors, or sometimes it just depends. Sometimes you have to declare you're you're in an ongoing lawsuit even though you did nothing wrong. So good to have that insurance. So it depends on your individual circumstances, as I said. really just look at what you need, where you are right now. If you're in a really early stage business, you may not need insurance. It's so early that you're not even performing enough activities to have you in the firing line. So there are plenty of instances where insurance is not necessary. Um, but yeah, for certain industries, I think, food and beverage, obviously, health and wellness. If you're a therapist, I think you have required to have insurance if you work in therapy. I hope so. Construction, obviously, just the obvious industries that require insurance. Make sure you have it, especially if you're selling some kind of product as well that could have health impacts. So just be, and if you're not sure, speak to a broker because they know everything. They know all the different types of insurance, and they can look at your individual circumstances. And they're not trying to hustle insurance on you, especially the one we work with. She's a friend of Flyte. She would never try and push insurance that you don't need, because we would just stop working with them if they did that. So, um, that's about it for that. We're only a few slides in. Shop around for insurance. It's an obvious one, but use multiple brokers if you want. But usually a broker will get you a bunch of quotes you can look at and different deductibles and co-insurance and all that. I'm not dwelling too much on insurance right now. I just wanted to say that's one of the main things you can do to protect yourself. Um, the things that are more important, I'd say, from this session are all of the preventative things I've talked about. So checking your statements, not carrying too many cards on you, changing your passwords, make sure you don't dump any trash that has your account details and a name on it and social security number on it. So try as you really want to do as much to prevent fraud, versus having to fight the fires of having had your identity stolen. So yeah, this is again, we talked about this. Keep accurate records because it'll really help for a lot of things. And that's part of what we try and do on this program is by the end of the 12 months, the aim is that amongst other things, you are tracking your income and expenses accurately and can produce simple financial statements, among many other things. So, insurance provides protection from financial loss. Keep accurate records of your assets. And yes, and in particular, if you are a business that is asset heavy, again, food and beverage, any retail business that has inventory, you want to know exactly what you got because if there's somehow a fraud, especially that involves the loss of those assets or theft, you want to know, especially with cash. Same with cash. If one of your employees is stealing from you, it's really hard to figure that out if you're not keeping track of everything. My mother had a small furniture business, and she had an employee stealing from her, and she's terrible at keeping records. But thankfully, her co her business partner very good at that, and he spotted the fraud. So it's really important to keep accurate records. Look at your statements, keep track of everything. That's the best way of avoiding fraud escalating. And employees, unfortunately, sometimes will take advantage of employers who don't do that, and they will know, okay, well, they don't look at the books. So I'm gonna try and skim off the top. So, tons of, I think, really important action items. Is anyone here? I'd love to. Is anyone here going to make a few changes? Is anyone here going to change passwords or use their card differently? Keep track of expenses more? I would love to hear from you. Are there any changes you plan on making after this session, even small ones?
I like the idea of having
Good morning, everybody. I started changing passwords already because I would always get some sort of notice and somebody spent money out of my account, not a business account, my personal account. So it made me change passwords for that. So when I get a breach or something happens with one account, I kind of try to update all of them. So yeah.
Good.
This is
Denise,
confirmation
sorry.
thing.
Yeah, I was saying, I like the idea of having a designated debit card just for like when you need to only use a debit card and just have a designated amount of funds associated with that debit card. Because I find I use my debit card a lot, maybe too much.
Mhm.
And, you know, I think I'm going to have to rethink that, even if it means opening up a separate account just for that one debit card and just use that one debit card exclusively for debit, where I know it's not attached to any money that I have associated for bills, you
Yeah.
know?
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's the other way you could protect yourself is having that second, if you don't feel like, or you don't want to have put it on a credit card or don't have a credit card, open up a second bank account with a separate debit card, and then
Yeah,
you know have a small amount of money in that account, and
right,
keep the bulk of it in an account where there's no debit card, or the debit card has never seen the light of day,
right,
and just put small amounts of money into that one, because then there's a very small limit on what they can steal when they get that information.
right. Good idea.
Good. It seems like a lot of folks are changing passwords. That's great. I mean, I think that's number one thing. It's easy to do. Change passwords, check statements at least once a month in detail, just to see everything that's going through. It's just great practice anyway. It's not just about fraud, it's about, keeping an eye on everything that's going through your business, because you'll be amazed at stuff that when you look regularly, you'll be amazed at what you see. Um, Monica said a lot of skimmers. Yes. Yeah. Credit card for purchases paid off every month. See, that's what I do. I literally just pay, you credit card, so much safer. Prepaid debit cards also safe. Ladora does that. Yeah, that's also a smart way of preventing fraud. If you have a prepaid debit card, there's a ceiling to how much they can take. So
Mm.
all good things. Lots of good suggestions there, and there are lots of different ways of minimizing risk that kind of fit more with what you plan on doing. So um, lots of takeaways from today. I know we're a bit early, so unless anyone has anything they'd like to share or any thoughts, questions for me. As I said, I'm not an expert on this. I'm really just presenting off a slide deck, and just sharing my best practices as a business owner and how I do it. But yeah, love to hear from anyone. All right. Excellent. Well, thank you so much for joining for this session. And it was great to see you all this morning. Thanks very much for your input. Um, and I will see you Thursday at 10 a.m. Looking forward to it, where we will get onto credit, which is everyone's favorite and least favorite topic. Because it's complicated, and it doesn't make any sense half the time, frankly. But it's really important. Unfortunately, they're all important. I say this every time. They're all really important topics. Credit is one of them. But we will break down the credit score and figure out, what are the different components and how we can make our scores go up as quickly as possible.
Mm.
Have a great day, everyone. Thank you.
Thank
Bye.
you.